Once something like that happens to you, your identity, because here I was getting ready for the role of a mother, like wasn't getting ready for you're gonna deliver a baby and then you're gonna have a massive heart attack and go to heart failure,
Right. Something happened that messed some things up. We don't know because we weren't in there and we didn't have an
And
advocate to ask questions for us. This is Rhea, and this is Just the Who of Us, where we talk about a range of topics, including life events, current events, spirituality, entertainment, family relationships, as well as answering listener questions and more.
hello.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
So, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Sudi, and my background is in economics and social development. So I
Okay.
did that for about more than a decade. And through that, I was really dealing with marginalized populations, minority populations, and people with disabilities of a
Oh,
vast different conditions, pediatric, adults, and elderly. So my main role was advocating for them and helping them navigate the healthcare system. And then I had my own medical events and I had to navigate the healthcare system myself and advocate for myself. And through all of that, now I do a lot of coaching and I teach courses on courage and self advocacy, as well as how do you recover? Like, when you get discharged from the hospital, it's sort of like there isn't much of an infrastructure to help you get back to who you were. It's sort of like now you're healed, your wounds are healed, go home, recuperate, and go along with your day. And
yes.
that doesn't work. There's
Uh-huh.
so much more than that, right? Because you as a person have changed. So much has happened to you. And beyond healing from the trauma is reconciliation with yourself about your previous identity, your new identity, as well as how do you mitigate them and still have a really full and enjoyable life. So yeah, so that's really where I'm at right now. It's something that I'm just starting in terms of the virtual version of it. So I do a
Okay.
lot of speaking engagements, but they're all in person. So I don't really have a podcast under my belt. And I'd like a venue to share my message. And I feel like your vision and my vision are aligned. So definitely. But I'm in Canada.
I was gonna
So
ask. Okay.
yeah, so I'm in Canada. So oftentimes it's navigating the Canadian healthcare system. And I'm on a bunch of different medical advisory boards where I see it from the inside. I talk to a lot of physicians. I'm on a lot of boards with a lot of physicians, healthcare providers. So just seeing it from different angles, from
Yeah.
the general population, from a patient perspective, and from government and institutional perspective. So that's the perspective that I bring.
Well, for one, I would love to talk about it. Healthcare is, oh man. And I know you're in Canada and I'm in North Carolina. So I can imagine the subtle and the vast differences in healthcare. Healthcare here, as I'm sure you know, is we could use a lot of improvements. Oh,
We could say the same. There's so much need for improvement, but the systems are so different that where one lacks, the other one is really strong, and vice
that's
versa.
true. That's true. So we could also compare and contrast. And I think it's really important the work that you do because advocacy is something that is typically kind of seen in the background until changes are made. And then it's like, oh, somebody was trying to do something about that, like
Yeah.
so so I think it's a really good thing to talk about.
And nobody really talks about self advocacy. How do you advocate for yourself for
Yes.
your own medical journey? Because sometimes, especially with the pandemic,
Yeah, yeah.
in Canada, there were no caregivers allowed in the hospitals. So what do you do? And you're left to your own. You're kind of like the physician tells me one thing, and I have there's no objection. I just have to receive it, right? And then a lot
Yeah.
of people just there's a huge emotional, psychological component to wellness that really got impacted and is not really discussed, even though the pandemic still continues under the radar, you know?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I think self-advocacy, a lot of us, we don't practice it because we don't know, right? Like we don't have this information unless we look for it. It's just like anything else. We don't know what we don't know, right? And we're going to
Exactly.
continue to not know unless we educate ourselves about it. It's one thing I
Tell me.
like about, oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I would love to also hear about your journey into creating the podcast and what initiated that need, right? Because a lot of times there's a desire to serve and there's a desire to fill a gap, right?
Yeah. So it's funny how it actually started and how it became what it's become because so my ex-husband came to me one day and so we divorced and we have been together in I don't know 10 years or so. We got married really young. So um well our youngest daughter is 13. She's almost 14. So it might even be like 12 years, 12 years. We haven't been together in a long time. But, we had this journey where we couldn't stand each other. And then we eventually came into our journey where we're now, where we co parent, we're really good friends. We just kind of had to rediscover our relationship. So he comes to me one day. This was probably like the beginning of last year, maybe like February or so. And he's like, I've been thinking about starting a podcast. And I was like, all right, cool, let's do it. So we set it up. We did one episode and he got busy. So I'm like, okay, well, I did the advertising. I created this pilot. I did the episode. Like things were going great. And now I'm just like, so now I just have this podcast. And our podcast initially was, about us. So it was about our journey, what we went through, how we get along now. And then we just plan to kind of talk about co-parenting things. And I have a really good friend who she's much younger than me. She was like, hey, well, I'll record some episodes with you while he's busy. I did other things. I recorded with a couple friends. I did, my cousin and, just little things to kind of fill in the time. And then my friend and I, we it just kind of became our thing. So it started out as trauma based. She and I have gone through some things throughout life, and we just kind of started dissecting these certain things, and those would be the topics we talked about. And then I started joining groups on Facebook, podcasting groups and things like that. I started expanding my podcast to other platforms and everything. And I was like, okay, well, I saw people talking about guests. So I was like, okay, let me try having a guest on here and there. And I got so much response that, like I said, I'm recording out through March now. I've been recording out for March since like December. So
That's pretty awesome. Like it sort of sounds like it naturally and organically grew.
yeah, absolutely. It was like, and the topics have changed too because, like I said, it was about trauma. So there was a lot of heavy stuff. And so, I wanted to kind of liven it up a little bit and give people a little break, because we hear stuff just heavy all the time and it kind of takes a toll on us. So I wanted to expand. And I still have my guest co-host on It's Bigger Than I, kind of even intended to be, which is crazy. It's a good crazy though.
Very good, crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I think from my perspective, I completely agree. Like when you just focus on the trauma, so much of it, and there's no uh, journey to healing or to the wellness portion or the empowerment and the courage part, it sort of leaves the person holding the ball of stress, and there's nowhere for it to go.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I try to do when I am talking about trauma, because I have a degree in master's degree in psychology, and I have a master's degree in holistic mental health and wellness. And so I do try to, you know, I'm not a licensed psychologist, so I can't sit here and say, hey, let's have a therapy session, legally. But I do try to use my education and my life experience to put some kind of guidance into the episode. So it's not just, okay, we're just hearing about this stuff and then the episode ends. And it's like, what do we do with it? I do try to, when I have those type of episodes, I do try to incorporate some type of advice or, life kind of guidance guided lesson in it so that people don't leave feeling like that, like, oh my, like, what do I do with this? Like, how do I process this information? So I try to put that in there too, so that it's not but that's not something I did in the beginning. In the beginning, we just kind of talked about it. So that's something that kind of evolved too.
I like that. So, what I get is you're growing a community. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Yeah. I love that. I love that.
yeah. Yeah, it did. It started as just a hobby. And then too, I'm like, okay, well, I have a cleaning business that I own and operate. And I also have a mental health business. So, when I first started the podcast, it was just a fun thing to do. But as I am running this other business that's completely unrelated to my degrees, I'm also thinking, okay, well, how can I use the degrees that I have and the education that I have? And after thinking that, I was like, I could really turn this podcast into something to where I am using my education and my life experience instead of just, I mean, I don't have anything wrong with fun podcasts. You know what I mean? Like, but there's not a ton of podcasts that aren't like celebrity hosted where we talk about daily life and we, dissect things and things like that. So that's pretty cool too, that I get to be one of the few.
Completely understand. Yeah. And I really support it. And you know what it is that you don't realize how much of a need there is until you talk to the people that are in need of it.
Yeah.
And then you find out that there's no resources out there for them. And you're like, oh, why is why is there no services and no
Yeah.
support systems and no it's sort of like the blind spot
Mhm.
almost.
Yeah. And two, I think that when a lot of people think healthcare, they think hospital or, my regular general practitioner. Um, I don't think as many people, maybe more so now than it used to be, but I could go back 10 years and tell you that people weren't thinking of mental health when they thought healthcare. And it really is such an important part of your overall health, and if you don't know that there are resources or how to find those resources and advocate and stand up for yourself and say, hey, I need this and I need to know how I can obtain this with what I have. You know what I mean? So I think that's a really important component of this too. Your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health, your financial health, like all those things, they all go together. And if one is kind of out of place, and I know from experience, like when one of those components is out of place for me, my life feels like it's in shambles, even if it's not really,
Yeah, it feels like you're on a topsy turvy. You're like,
Hmm.
how do I get a control and get a balance?
Hmm.
And you really can. It's hard to assess when you're in it
Yeah.
because you're emotionally experiencing the whole
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. 100%. And we know I can sit here and I can assess someone's situation and I can know exactly what they should do, how they should approach certain things, what's not working, what can we evaluate to figure out what could work and try those things. Absolutely. But me, I'm like, okay, let me tell myself the textbook things. It's why we go to therapy. It's why therapists have a therapist, because you can't therapy yourself. You're not looking from a different perspective.
Completely understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. I know you said that you were doing this kind of before you had your own healthcare situation.
Yeah.
What kind of got you into this to be
Yeah.
advocating for this?
Yeah, at that point, earlier on, I was running a nonprofit organization. That I'll have to go back a little bit more. During university, I was working on nonprofit organizations that serve marginalized populations with disabilities, people with
Okay.
chronic disabilities. And then when I got out of it, when I finished my degree, an opportunity came to relaunch a small nonprofit that had lost its funding due to financial mismanagement and such. So I grew that, and then with that, I created a social enterprises to support the funding cycles. And while I was doing that with the clients that I was overseeing, or like the teams that I was managing, their clients, I would have to step in to advocate for them to navigate for a client. For example, a client, one particular situation, there was a young girl who had a who needed a surgery, like a an urgent pancreatic surgery,
Mhm.
but the doctor we didn't know had been already working 12-hour shift. So by the time he was doing her surgery, he was severely exhausted.
Yeah.
And the surgery went terrible. He ended up uh, doing surgery on other organs and basically ruined her reproductive organs. So things like that. So I would be there at the bedside
Whoa.
with the family, advocating for the family about what happened and the legal repercussions to her life as a whole. Like her digestive
Yeah.
system was damaged, her reproductive system was damaged, and then uh, the family didn't know what do we do. Like they never expected this level of a malpractice, and
Yeah.
then in all healthcare like hospitals, the lawyers, the doctors have so many different lawyers and support systems that
Mm,
the family is sort of up against the giant. Like how do they fight back, right?
right.
So
Yeah.
mhm. So then I would have to connect the media into that, lawyers that are doing pro bono work, and it was just a whole ecosystem I have to create to support the client.
Uh-huh.
So that's where my health advocacy prior to my own experiences came. And then afterwards, I got married, I got pregnant, and then during the delivery, I suffered a massive heart attack, which
Oh my
no,
gosh.
yeah, nobody. And then my at the time, my nurses were like, "Oh, you know what? It's just a surgery. You have to walk it off. It might be an air blockage. You'll be fine." And then as I kept advocating for myself, an ECG was done, and
Hmm.
then it showed that I had a massive heart attack, and
Wow.
that heart attack ended up needing a stent. The stent caused 7 more heart attacks and put me in heart failure. So it is quite the story. But that's what I mean. Like you once something like that happens to you, your identity, because here I was getting ready for the role of a mother, like being like that new I getting on that new identity of, oh, I'm gonna be a mom, I'm gonna be this kind of
Yeah.
mom. And I just that's what I was getting ready for. I wasn't getting ready for you're gonna deliver a baby and then you're gonna have a massive heart attack and go to heart failure, you
Right.
know? So then how do you
Wow.
reconcile those two different, one that feels foreign, right? And that's when you have to assume it too, right?
Yeah.
So and I think there was no support system for that. And that's where the desire to continue this advocacy work, even though I wasn't no longer a nonprofit, came in
Yeah.
because I saw a lot of other patients that were going through the same thing.
Yeah. That's crazy. Um, I have a friend, because I've never heard like a story like that. I mean, I imagine things like that happen, right? But I haven't had a conversation with another person who I haven't experienced it myself. But a very close friend of mine, she was pregnant. She went into the hospital, was actually planning her delivery. So, they were doing the things to have the, delivery moving along. Me and her mom, everything was fine. Her mom and I went outside, I don't know, 5 minutes while we were gone. Now, mind you, we had been there all day. While we were gone, she had a heart attack or stroke. Um, and we come back and to her room, we're like, where'd she go? Oh, she had a complication. We have to hurry up and get the baby out and do all these things. She ended up in ICU. She delivered. She was in the ICU, I don't know, for like a week or so. So, this whole time, she can't talk. She's in a coma essentially. And like it was insane. Like perfectly fine seeming, perfectly fine waiting to deliver her baby. We leave and then all of a sudden like and I think that her mom maybe kind of, I mean, she asked some questions, but I imagine like what happened? What happened in that few minutes? You know what I mean? That like everything was fine. And so it's a situation like that where had we had more education or an advocate that we could reach out to, things could have been a little different. I don't know. It's like something happened that messed some things up, but we don't know because we weren't in there and we didn't have an
And
advocate to ask questions for us.
and also the women's heart health or women's any kind of health issues that are not as I would say generic in terms of the health will focus on women's reproductive cycles, period, menstrual challenges, migraine, these things. But other real core issues are under researched.
Mm-hmm.
Where for a male, they won't be like a lot of when you hear about the symptoms of a heart attack, you automatically think, oh, I can't breathe, my chest hurts. These
Yeah,
are the
yep, chest
symptoms of
pain.
a
Yep.
male. Yeah, these are male symptoms of a heart attack. These are not
Mm-hmm.
consistent with all female heart attacks. And if a female presents different symptoms, she's often dismissed because
Yeah.
she's just stressed out. So
Oh, it's just
these
gas or stress or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're kind of conditioned to bear a burden beyond our capacity, and then when our bodies break down, there are no resources often in place.
Right. Well, and then too, we know that like we typically carry the household stress, right? Like and men carry stress, but they carry it in a different way. My fiance, he says, okay, I did this kind of like activity one day. And I was like, all right, we're going to take this piece of paper and I want you to write on the paper everything that is currently on your mind stressing you out. Okay. He takes this piece of paper. I swear he had like three things on it. My paper, front and back, was like this. Just, I mean, I wrote up in the margins. I had everything that was on my mind. And I was like, really? That's all that you're thinking about? Like, I've got
And
five.
those three items are breaking him down.
Yes. But then he explains it to me and he's like, you know what? If I stress about more than these few things, I'm gonna have a heart attack. I'm going to stress myself into an early death. He's like, so I can't have more than these three things. And it was kind of like a dang, like, you know what I mean? Like a aha moment for me because I was like, ooh, like I
Do you see the self care in that?
yeah,
He and where is
yes,
that for women? How come we don't
yeah,
have that boundaries for ourselves? You know,
right.
it's a paradox.
Yes, yes, because it's kind of and then too unless you sit down and have conversations, certain conversations, you don't really know what's on their mind because men carry things differently. Naturally, we are the nurturers typically. And so we are reaching out because on my paper, it wasn't just stuff to do with me. It was things pertaining to children and the future and finances and these different relationships and whatnot. It wasn't just about things that pertain to me. And his thing was just things pertain to him because he's like, I can't really control all the other stuff, all this other stuff that the other people and things like that. I can control how I interact with them and how I handle the things with them, but I can't control them. And that was a profound thing to me too, because I was like, I have a lot to learn from you. Like, your man brain is like it simplifies things where our women brain we really complicate things. We really do. It's like,
So true. So true.
but it's funny because he pointed out, he's like, the men typically die before the wives, although they try to compartmentalize and just have these few little things. He's like, it's usually us that goes first.
Is that because the data says that, or is that for real? Like I question that too. Because if we're under research, then we're not even documented. So who's
Right.
really documenting?
And I know a widower. I actually, one of my clients, he's a widower. His wife passed. And it was, she did the thing that women do. She stressed about everything. She was overweight. She, didn't take a good care of all the aspects of herself. Where he was kind of opposite. He's just kind of laid back and he's like, okay, we'll just take things as they come. And he tries to take good care of himself. And she passed, way before him. So it is. It's interesting that you say that because it's true. What statistics are we looking at? What, you know what I mean? What are we hearing and not really educating ourselves on that we could be, and we're just kind of taking these
Yeah, we're
yeah.
internalizing narratives that might not be accurate, you know?
Yes. Yes.
And then we base our judgments on those.
Yes. And really, we've all learned. I feel like these last few years, if nothing else, and maybe it's age because I will be 38 in May, so I'm like inching closer to 40 and it maybe could be some of that. But it's like, what are we really paying attention to? I don't watch the news. I went through a period where I didn't, and then I went through a period where I did. And let me tell you, I was so much more stressed out when my grandma and my mom sit and watch the news every night. And I'm like, how are you sane? Because I just can't. Like, I have 5 children. I have businesses. I have a fiance. I have books. Like, I have things that are right here. And while it's important to know what's going on in the world, I take things on. So if I'm hearing about everything that's going on with everybody else, like that's just more stress on me. It kind of goes back to the things we can't control. Like I want to be educated. I want to know what's going on, but I can't control certain things. And for me to just have it in my head all the time, it's not healthy. So I don't watch the news. I try to stay away. You get the alerts on your phone and I'm like, I don't need it today. Like I'll hear
I'm
about
I'm
it
the,
from him or whatever.
I'm the same way. Like unless it's affecting my immediate life right now and
Yes.
my immediate needs, I don't need to know about it because it is toxic energy that is infiltrating my mind, and I don't want it
Yeah.
there.
Well, and it's the news, right? And most news stations have an agenda. So the better way for me to process the information that's going on in the world is to educate myself about it. And I can't thoroughly educate myself through the media because a media has a focused agenda. So why drive myself crazy? Why not just learn about these things, educate myself on them, know what's going on, but not stress and have a heart attack over it because I can't control it.
Wow, that's awesome. Like there's nothing in life where you don't fail and you succeed. Everything there's a trial and error, and you
Yeah,
fail,
yeah.
you just get to it, and you succeed eventually, and you have so much wisdom, right? And then
Yes.
there's wisdom there.
Hmm. Yeah. As long as you keep learning, you're not failing. you know, like I said with the divorce, I was like, well, I failed it. I failed at marriage. Why would I counsel people on it? I've learned certain things. I've grown up a little bit, had certain other life experiences and things like that. So it's definitely perspective too.
Honestly, Ria, it was so nice talking to you today. I feel like I
You.
sort of made a virtual friend.
Yes, yes. I'm so happy. I would love to stay connected.
Yeah. So nice. I'm wishing you a beautiful day.
Thank you. You
Um,
too.
and thank you so for the information you shared with me. That's so helpful. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I hope to speak with you soon and
Okay.
have a next, yeah.
Thank you. You have a wonderful day and I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If anyone wants to chime in or if anybody has questions they want us to answer or topics to discuss, you can leave that on the Facebook page. Visit www.philolity.net. That's FALOLITY